I have a reading for you now. I heard this on NPR yesterday, and it was just what I was looking for. It encapsulates the feelings that I had, both of sorrow and of focus for our service this morning. It's by Scott Simon, and he starts, "The news can get hard to get through each day. Wars and crimes and suffering of innocents, the warming of the planet, the rising of the seas, wildfires, lockdowns, detainment camps, and millions displaced by war throughout the world. Sometimes there's just too much to take in. This weekend includes Passover, Easter Sunday, and the continuation of Ramadan, holidays about rescue, about renewal and reflection, stories about the parting of seas for people to escape slavery, a great soul rising and fasting on long nights of prayer, to remind ourselves of the preciousness of life." Sarah Sager, a cantor in Beechwood, Ohio, told of this coincidence of the holy days represents the right of every human being to be free. For 3,000 years, we have been observing this holiday with the same vision, and we will continue to do so until that vision is realized. Somehow, it shouldn't be so hard or rare. Imam Bakram Numan El-Amin in Minneapolis told us, "I choose not to see this coincidence, but a sign that all the faiths overlap. We bring multitudes around the globe together in acts of prayer this weekend for the common good of all peoples throughout the whole world. This is especially important in a time of conflict and social justice concerns," he says. And last, Sister Margaret Guider of the Boston School of Theology and Ministry sent us a poem that reads in part, "The convergence of these sacred days should serve as a collective reminder that the prophetic heritage of our respective faith traditions whether adhered to or not. Should give us an opportunity to see ourselves as connected to our ancestors, and may that it continue to permeate the air which human frailty breathes, of freedom, love, and peace, and life-giving birth to those who see in each other the holy. Yet many of us throughout the year breathe through our mouths while holding our noses, she writes. And in doing so, we defend ourselves from the suffocating air of bondage and hatred and violence that surrounds us. And when we do so, we also close ourselves off from the opportunity of smelling the sense of justice, hope, and compassion that arouses our consciousness and gives rise to courage and resiliency. Perhaps these holy days will provide us with an opportunity to open ourselves, to be moved. Christians, East and West, Muslims, Shia and Sunni, and Jews and Orthodox and Reformed, to breathe in the sense of the sacred, of freedom, love, and peace that we're called to breathe out not only on special days, but every day. And now we share in some music by the choir, and note that we are singing a song titled Lean In Toward the Light.
Winter is the oldest season. Quietly beneath the snow, seeds are stretching out and reaching, faithful as the morning glow.
Carry nothing but what you must.
Lean in towards the light.
Let it go, shake off the dust.
Lean in towards the light.
Today is now, tomorrow beckons.
Lean in towards the light.
Keep practicing resurrection.
Lean in towards the light.
Shadows of this world will say, there's no hope, why try anyway? Every kindness, large or slight, shifts the balance towards the light.
Waters wind and open wide. Towards the light. Don't just walk when you can fly. Towards the light. When justice seems in short supply. Towards the light. Let beauty be your truest guide. Towards the light.
Shadows of this world
Lean in toward the light.
left undone, be put aside.
Lean in toward the light.
When forgiveness is hard to find,
Lean in toward the light.
your plea at least to be kind.
Lean in toward the light. Lean in toward the light.
This beautiful morning, this spring morning, we gather here. For many, this is Easter morning, a morning of Easter baskets and chocolates and flowers. And Easter in its many forms has been celebrated in many names and many different forms throughout human history. The theme of this sermon is there always has been and there always will be an Easter. Let me explain. As each new year comes, there is springtime, and people wonder about death and they celebrate life. There will be an Easter. Joan Goodwin writes that Easter got its name from the direction of the sun rising. After the longest night of the year, people watched as the sun rose in the east a little earlier and a little higher in the sky each week. And even before the calendars, people knew that the longer days meant melting snow, softening soil, a time to plant, another harvest on the way, another year of life to live. And the spring equinox was the triumph of the sun over darkness. Along with that, we have symbols of life, eggs and newborn lambs and lots of bunnies. That has been a part of springtime celebrations far back as far as we know. And the ancient Egyptians told stories of death and resurrection and the stories of Osiris and Set. And Babylonians told stories of Tammuz, the god of the harvest, who died young, and of Ishtar, the goddess of love, who rescued him from the underworld to live forever. Resurrection through love. And the ancient Hebrew tribes were neighbors of these lands, and the symbolism of springtime rituals of death and rebirth are echoed in the celebrations of Passover. The egg, the new leaf, the sacrificial lamb, along with unleavened bread and wine, offer a passage from the old to the new. It was a Passover Seder that Jesus shared with his disciples on the last Thursday night of his life. His people hoped that he would set them free in the land of the Romans, who occupied their promised land. And Jesus preached freedom from old laws. He preached that a new promised land was in one's heart. And the Romans, in fear of the power Jesus held in this message, suspected that he was going to call his people to an uprising against the government. So hundreds of years after the original Passover, Jesus was killed. People said that God had sacrificed his own son, such as the sacrificial lamb of the Hebrew custom, and they called Jesus the Lamb of God. And his followers did not accept his death. And as in all the ancient stories from Babylonians to Egyptians, it was love that could not conquer death. That love was in hope that he could rise again. The story of Mary. The ancient story elements were revived, and they tell of Mary and the other women going to the tomb of Jesus and meeting the angel and saying, "He is risen. Why seek you among the living and the dead?" And so a new ritual began, followed by generations and generations of Christians. In celebration of Jesus' resurrection, Christians partake of his strength and the Spirit with unleavened bread and the wine of the last Seder supper. And we are here today, thousands of years later after that story, that culminates from thousands of stories of Passover and life after death, seen through love, we are here celebrating renewal with springtime all around us. The story of the resurrection of Jesus need neither be taken as fact nor interpreted to be scientifically acceptable. It can simply be left as is, written in the form of poetry, from the heart of people who were grieving the loss of their beloved leader. And in this story, we can still find meaning thousands of years later. This week, I spoke to a friend who I was in seminary with, and she grew up in a very conservative Christian community. She lived in a secluded religious compound, the kind where she went to school with people and lived with people and did not see people outside of that community for the first 13 years of her life. What she did have was a community to be grounded in. And her favorite memories were of Easter. She said she would walk up to the top of a hill with her family as it was dark, and they would wait for the sun to rise. And the sunrise was the symbolism of life triumphing over death. It was springtime anew. She shared that she and her family often wept, knowing the symbolism of life conquering death. They wept for the opportunity to be renewed, and together this day imbued meaning in her heart. Eventually, she did come to terms with her own changing theology, and she needed to leave the community and find one elsewhere, because her beliefs did not align anymore, and her family required that she either believe and stay or not believe anymore and leave. After she left, many Easters came and went, and she and I talked about the heartbreak she experienced, longing to be with her family on the hill on sunrise as the sun rose. She knew that she could not go with integrity and participate in a ritual that did not align to her beliefs anymore. So we talked about the bigger story of Easter in our seminary class as we shared our own experiences of that story and what it meant to us. She said for her, the celebration of Easter has become a part of the human story itself, a story for all time, for all peoples, that it's a celebration of life anew that comes after deep grief. And I told her that I am planning to watch the sunrise today with that in mind. And as I drove from Atlanta here, it was really quite foggy. And I went over a hill, and the sun was coming up, and it kind of made the fog turn yellow all around it. And I thought of her. I talked with her, and she said that she was hoping to call her grandmother and ask if she could come to Easter. She shared that her grandmother said, with tears clearly in her eyes, and you could hear her voice wavering, "Yes, my dear, please come to be with us. We miss you and we love you." She is going to go with an open heart to renewal, knowing that all stories, all myth, come from the deepest place in our hearts, that place of longing for love. For this is what the core of religious action comes from: poetry. Poetry and the words we seek to explain those emotions and the ineffable. Easter is a story written for everyone, anyone who felt the sting of loss of death and wishes for something more. Easter is a story for anyone who loves life so much that they pray for more life to follow. Easter is a story for people who can envision a loving divinity that will not be conquered by evil. It's a story of love that never dies, of immovable objects that get tossed aside, and the seeking of happy endings in a tragic world, and of faith. Faith rewarded and vision restored and hope justified. This is our story. This is the world's story. Our story today is just another chapter in this human story. So today we come, as people have for thousands of years, to worship and sing praises, to celebrate the victory of hope and despair, to be reminded of the ever-renewing spirit of life itself, and to mark springtime with beautiful, beautiful flowers. And that is why the flower communion is such a fitting thing for this day. I want to add something, that Norbert Chapek died in World War II in Dachau. Whenever I think of this story and I want to share it with the children, I have to decide whether or not I add that piece, and I decided not to today. I know that there is a time and a place for that reality to be explained. On a day when we are celebrating the conquering of life after death, I want to share something that he wrote to his brother and to his wife on the last letter that was sent home. He was doing something in the camp that allowed him to get letters out, because not everyone had that privilege. He wrote that we must all seek for our souls to sing even in the darkness, even when evil is all around us. And when I think of what we are seeing in the world, so visually palpable on TV and online at this time now of war, not just in Ukraine, but in other places of the war and all the things we are experiencing, I want to remember that he is seeking for us to seek hope, to seek justice, and to seek light in a time of darkness.